There were only 4 working chairs in that living room and about 11 of us trying to watch the championship game, which is the actual, boring, logistical reason I ended up on Beckett's lap that night. Not some grand romantic setup, just bad furniture math in a house full of guys who'd rather argue about seating than miss a single play. I was 21, a senior living in the Kappa Delta house that year even though housing wasn't technically required for seniors, mostly because my roommate's situation the previous year had been a disaster, and Beckett had talked me into just staying in the house one more year with him. He was our chapter's social chair, the kind of guy who remembered everyone's birthday and could talk to literally anyone at a party without it feeling forced, and also, as far as I knew, completely straight. He'd dated a string of girls over the years, nothing that stuck for more than a few months, but definitely girls, definitely not the kind of guy I let myself think about in any way beyond friendship. Because I'd learned a long time ago that letting myself think that way about straight friends only ever ended in disappointment. I should say clearly, since it matters for everything that comes after, I came out at 19 halfway through sophomore year to a mixed reaction from the guys in the house. Most of them didn't care, a few overcorrected into being weirdly, performatively supportive in a way that felt almost more exhausting than if they'd just been normal about it, and one guy transferred to a different chapter entirely, which nobody really missed. Beckett had been one of the normal ones, he never made it weird. He also never made a single comment that made me think, even for a second, that there was anything more there than friendship. That night, the night of the game, the couch situation had gotten genuinely ridiculous. 2 guys were sitting on the floor, another was perched on the arm of a chair in a way that looked deeply unstable, and I was standing near the doorway with a plate of nachos, resigned to watching the game from an awkward angle, when Beckett looked over at me from his spot on the good couch, the one without the spring poking through, and just said completely casually, like it was the most normal suggestion in the world. "Dude, just sit here, there's room." There was, in fact, no room, not really, not unless one of us sat on the other, and I laughed and said something like, "Where, exactly?" and he just patted his own knee, grinning, clearly not thinking twice about it. "I'm serious, sit down, you're blocking my view standing there anyway." I want to explain that this wasn't some charged, loaded moment when it happened. It felt like exactly what it looked like, a straight guy who didn't think twice about physical affection with his friends, offering up his lap the same way he'd offer up the last slice of pizza without any deeper calculation behind it. I sat down. He didn't flinch, didn't make it weird, just kept yelling at the TV about a penalty call, one arm loosely resting against my back to keep me steady, and within about 2 minutes I'd mostly forgotten the strangeness of it because everyone else in the room had too. Nobody made a joke, nobody commented, it just became part of the night. Except it didn't leave my head the same way it apparently left everyone else's. I remember lying awake that night, replaying it, feeling stupid for replaying it because it hadn't been anything. It had been a seating arrangement. Straight guys did stuff like that all the time, especially frat guys, especially the ones who'd grown up in big physical families where affection wasn't a big deal. I told myself that on repeat until I mostly believed it. Except then it happened again, not the exact same thing but variations of it, over the following weeks. Beckett threw his arm around my shoulders during a study session that had nothing to do with studying and everything to do with him wanting to watch me struggle through a chemistry problem set for entertainment. Beckett fell asleep against my shoulder on a bus ride back from a chapter event 3 hours away, not waking up until we were basically back on campus, mumbling an embarrassed apology that didn't quite match how long he'd actually been out. Small things. Things that on their own meant nothing, the way one puzzle piece means nothing until you've got enough of them to see a shape. I brought it up to my friend Priya, no relation to the Priya from a story I might have told you about before, just a genuinely common name, this one a biochem major who lived in the dorm next to the Kappa Delta house and had heard approximately every version of my crises since freshman year. "He's straight," I told her over coffee one afternoon, stirring my drink way more than necessary. "I know he's straight, I'm not delusional, I just don't understand why he does stuff like that if he's straight." "Maybe he's just an affectionate person," she said, shrugging. "Some straight guys are like that, it doesn't mean anything." Yeah, that's what I keep telling myself. But it's starting to feel like something, I don't know. Probably just me projecting because I've had a stupid crush on him for like a year and I'm trying to find evidence that isn't there. She looked at me for a long moment, the way people do when they're deciding whether to say something honest or something comfortable. "Or," she said carefully, "it's actually something and you're both too scared to say it out loud, so you're just doing this slow orbit thing where nothing ever actually gets addressed." I didn't have a good response to that, mostly because some small, quiet part of me thought she might be right, and I wasn't ready to sit with that possibility yet. The thing that actually broke the pattern happened about 2 months later, at a smaller gathering, not a full house party, just 5 or 6 of us in the common room after most people had already gone to bed. We'd been drinking, though nobody was drunk, just loose in that easy late-night way, and the conversation had drifted into one of those rare honest late-night territories where people start saying things they wouldn't say in daylight. Someone, I don't even remember who, one of the sophomores, asked me a fairly blunt question about dating as a gay guy in a frat, whether it was ever weird, whether I ever felt like an outsider in the house. I gave some honest but light answers, something about how it had its moments but the guys were mostly good about it, and the conversation moved on to other things. Except Beckett got quiet after that. Not immediately, it took a few more minutes, a few more topics passed by, but I noticed it, the way he'd gone from his usual easy participation in the conversation to just sort of sitting there, nursing his drink, staring at nothing in particular. Eventually people started peeling off to bed, one at a time. Until it was just me and him left in the common room, the TV playing something neither of us was actually watching anymore. "You okay?" I asked, because his quiet had started to feel like a specific kind of quiet, not just tired. "Yeah," he said too fast, then after a pause, "No, actually, kind of not." "What's up?" He didn't answer right away. He picked at the label on his bottle, peeling it in slow, careful strips, the way people do when their hands need something to do while their brain works through something bigger. "Can I ask you something and you promise not to make it weird?" he said finally. "I mean, no promises, but go ahead." He almost laughed at that, a small huff of air, but it faded fast. "When you came out sophomore year," he said, "were you scared, like actually scared, or was it more just nerves?" That wasn't a question I expected. I sat with it for a second. "Both, honestly," I said. "I was scared of losing people, nerves about how exactly to say it. But underneath all that, I think I was more scared of continuing to lie than I was of the actual coming out part, if that makes sense." He nodded slowly, still not looking at me, still peeling at that label. "Why are you asking?" I said carefully. "I don't know," he said, which was clearly not true given how long he'd been sitting on whatever this actually was. "I've just been thinking about it a lot lately, about lying, about continuing to lie versus actually saying something and dealing with whatever comes after." My heart had started doing something complicated, that specific mix of hope and terror that comes from suspecting you know where a conversation is headed and being too scared to actually let yourself believe it. "Beckett," I said, "what's going on?" He finally looked up at me, and there was something in his face I'd genuinely never seen on him before, not the easy, confident social chair energy he usually wore like a second skin, but something rawer, something closer to fear. "I don't think I'm as straight as everyone thinks I am," he said, including me up until pretty recently." I didn't say anything. I don't think I could have. I've dated girls my whole life because that's just what I thought I was supposed to do, and I like some of them genuinely. I'm not saying that part was fake. But there's been this other thing underneath it for a long time that I kept telling myself was nothing. And it got a lot harder to tell myself that after you sat on my lap during the game a couple months ago. My whole chest went tight. "I offered you my knee because I genuinely didn't think about it," he said, laughing a little embarrassed. "That's the truth. I wasn't scheming anything. But then you sat down and it was, I don't know, it messed with my head in a way I wasn't prepared for, and it didn't stop messing with my head for weeks afterward. And I started noticing all this other stuff, like how I always find some excuse to sit near you. How I fell asleep on your shoulder on that bus and honestly wasn't actually asleep for most of it. I just didn't want to move." "You weren't asleep." "Not for like 20 minutes of it," he admitted, wincing. "I'm not proud of that. It was kind of insane in retrospect." I laughed, a startled, disbelieving sound, and he laughed too, both of us clearly relieved to have something to do with the tension besides just sitting in it. "I don't know what any of this means," he continued, more serious again. "I'm not saying I have this all figured out. I don't know if I'm bi or if this is just about you specifically or what. I've never let myself actually examine any of it until pretty recently because it felt easier to just keep being the guy everyone already thinks I am. But I couldn't keep sitting on this. Especially not after tonight, hearing you talk about lying versus telling the truth. I didn't want to be someone who chose to lie." "Okay," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I meant it to. "Okay, can I say something honest too?" "Please." I've had a thing for you for like a year, maybe longer. I've been telling myself it was nothing because you were straight and I didn't want to be the guy who ruins a friendship by projecting something that isn't there. So I've just been sitting on it, the same way you've apparently been sitting on this. He let out a breath, this long, shaky exhale, like something in him had finally been allowed to unclench. So we've both been doing the exact same dumb thing, he said, for basically the same amount of time. Looks like it. We sat there for a second, both of us processing, both of us clearly aware that the next move mattered a lot more than anything either of us had said out loud before that night. I don't want to rush into anything, he said, careful now, like he was choosing each word with real weight behind it. I don't want to kiss you right now just because it's a charged moment and then wake up tomorrow freaking out about what it means. I want to actually figure this out, but I also don't want to just go back to pretending nothing happened because I don't think I can do that anymore. So what do we do instead? I asked. I don't know, can we just start slow, actually talk about this instead of one of us panicking and shutting it down? Yeah, I said, I can do it slowly. It was genuinely slow, which I appreciated more than I expected to at the time. We started having actual conversations about it, not just the one big confession but ongoing, sometimes awkward, sometimes very unsure conversations over the following weeks. He told his roommate before he told anyone else in the house, a guy named Diego who apparently just said, "Okay, cool, does this change movie night?" and nothing else, which made Beckett laugh so hard he almost cried from relief. He didn't tell his parents right away. That took him almost 8 months, actually, a slow and careful process that involved a lot of anxious phone calls to me the night before and after. But he told me first, every important step of it, which felt like its own kind of declaration even before either of us used any bigger words. We didn't officially become anything for almost 2 months after that night in the common room. There was a first date, eventually, awkward in the specific way first dates are awkward when you already know each other so well that the small talk feels almost performative. Both of us laughing about how weird it was to be nervous around someone whose lap you'd already sat on in front of 10 other guys during a football game. This is so backwards, he said at one point during that date, grinning. Most people go on dates and then eventually get physically comfortable with each other. We did the physical comfort part like 6 months before the actual date. Yeah, our timeline's a mess. I don't mind a messy timeline, he said, reaching for my hand across the table a little unsure. Checking my face before he actually did it, as long as we get there eventually. There were harder moments after that first date too. I don't want to make it sound like once he said the big thing everything else was smooth. Telling the rest of the house was its own process, spread out over months, some guys completely unbothered, a couple visibly uncomfortable in ways they tried to hide and mostly failed at, one guy who made a joke that wasn't really a joke and got quietly, firmly shut down by 3 other guys before Beckett even had to say anything himself, which was its own kind of relief to witness. His parents' reaction when it finally came was complicated. Not rejection exactly, but a long stretch of careful, stilted phone calls where his dad kept accidentally using the wrong pronouns for the idea of Beckett dadding someone, correcting himself each time with visible effort, which Beckett found more exhausting than an outright bad reaction might have been in some ways, because at least a bad reaction would have been clear. But through all of it, the actual core of the thing between us just kept getting steadier. By graduation, almost a year and a half after that football game, we weren't hiding anything anymore. His parents came to the ceremony and sat with my parents, and there was a slightly stiff but genuine handshake exchanged between our dads that Beckett texted me a photo of from across the stadium with the caption "Progress," and I laughed so hard reading it that the guy next to me in the graduation line asked if I was okay. We moved into an apartment together about 4 months after that, a small one-bedroom near his new job, which felt like an insane amount of commitment for 2 guys who'd started this whole thing over bad couch math at a football game, but somehow didn't feel insane in practice, just like the obvious next thing. I think about that night on the couch sometimes, the actual moment itself, how unremarkable it felt in real time. If you told me sitting there on his knee watching a game neither of us really cared about the outcome of, that it was going to be the exact thing that eventually cracked something open in both of us, I don't think I would have believed you. It didn't feel like the beginning of anything. It felt like bad furniture logistics in a crowded room. Beckett still brings it up sometimes, usually when we're on our actual couch now, the one we picked out together, plenty of room for both of us to sit separately if we wanted to, which we never do. You know, I really was just thinking about the game that night, he'll say, half laughing, half something more sincere underneath it. I want that on record, I wasn't scheming. I believe you, I tell him every time. I just think your knee had other plans. And every time he laughs and pulls me a little closer anyway, like he's still, even now, relieved he doesn't have to pretend not to want to.